Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are still doing chapter 13. We've been talking about natural selection and artificial selection. Let's keep talking about natural selection and artificial selection. Remember that natural selection is when nature favors some traits over others. Artificial selection is when humans favor some traits over others. Well, let's talk about pesticide and antibiotic resistance. Which is this? Is this natural selection? Is nature selecting for pesticide-resistant bugs? Or are humans selecting for pesticide-resistant bugs? As far as the bugs are concerned, it's natural selection. As far as we're concerned, it's accidental, artificial selection. Imagine you got a field full of bugs. You're going to spray that field with a pesticide, and it's going to kill most of the bugs. But the ones that it doesn't kill are the ones that are resistant to that pesticide. Who are the only ones that can have babies tomorrow? The individuals that survive today. So if I kill off all the ones that are weak to the pesticide, what are the only ones that remain? Ones that are resistant to the pesticide. If mommy is resistant to the pesticide and daddy is resistant to the pesticide, what does that mean for babies? It means that babies will probably also be resistant to the pesticide. We've done this with lots of species of bugs accidentally. We've done this with lots of species of bacteria accidentally. We've made multi-antibiotic resistant bacteria. How have we done this? By overusing antibiotics. And there are some bacteria that are resistant to everything we make. So they just make new drugs, just make new antibiotics. The bacteria are able to develop resistance faster than we can develop new antibiotics. Natural selection is editing. It is not a creative process. It can't make new things. It can only remove existing ones. We didn't make disease-resistant bugs in the previous slide. They were already there, not disease-resistant. I'm sorry, pesticide-resistant. We didn't make pesticide-resistant bugs. They were already there. We just amplified them by getting rid of all of the competition. Natural selection is tied to a time and a place. If that field had never been sprayed with that pesticide, those pesticide-resistant bugs would never have flourished. It's only because in that field, which was sprayed with that pesticide, all the ones that were weak to that pesticide were killed. If some other field with those same bugs in it that got sprayed with a different pesticide, different bugs lived and different bugs died. Natural selection is tied to a time and place, right now, right here. The only thing you have to do is survive the conditions of today. Because if you survive the conditions of today, what can you do? You can have babies tomorrow. How do we get new genes then? How do we get these new codes? The way we get these new codes is by randomly changing the current code. The random change is called mutation. Mutations are almost always bad. If it's 1 chance in a million, if it's a 1 in a million chance you're going to get a good mutation and a 999,000 chance you're going to die, it's not really something you want to do. But I want you to think about that. If a good mutation is 1 in a million, how many people live on the planet? 7.5 billion people. How many chances then are there out there for good mutations? 7,500. If a good mutation is 1 in a million, and there are 7.5 billion people, that means there are 7,500 people out there that have a beneficial mutation. When you have a high enough population, when you have a large enough population, you're going to have individuals with good mutations. You're also going to have a lot of them that die, but that's okay. There's always more people. Mutation is a random change of the current genes, and it's the source of new genes. It's the source of new alleles. How do we get all of these different colors of snakes? If we were to look at this, you'd say, how many different species are here? Well, there's 4 very different colored snakes. We have 4 very different species, and we don't. What we have is 4 very differently colored garter snakes. These are ordinary eastern garter snakes. Why do they have such different coloration? Well, for the most part, because they're found in different environments. Natural selection is tied to a time and a place. This individual fits really good in his environment, and that one fits pretty good in his, and that one fits pretty good in hers. Why do we have so many different colors? Because every population needs diversity. Why do they need diversity? Because the world changes. If the world changes and everything is the same, and you don't fit anymore, that means your entire species is dead. So, in order to make sure that the species survives, we need lots of variety. We need lots of diversity. And that's what natural selection works on. Natural selection works on this natural diversity. Editing out the ones that don't fit, leaving the ones that do. Mutation makes new individuals, makes new combinations to try to come up with a way of matching tomorrow. Mutation, as we said, very rarely a mutation can actually improve an individual's life. Most of the time it doesn't, but that's okay because you can always just make more individuals. Very rarely a mutation can improve an individual's ability to survive an environment, and therefore its reproductive success. If you are better able to get food think about it in terms of the natural system. Think about it in terms of a native person point of view. If you think about it in terms of native person point of view, if you're able to get more food, then you're able to live longer. You won't go through those periods of starvation. And because you don't go through those hard times, you're going to live longer. And if you live longer, what are you going to do? In a natural situation, you're going to have more babies. The one who has more babies leaves behind more genes in the next generation, and if they leave behind more genes in the next generation, those good genes that that parent had that helped them to do better hopefully will be passed on to their children. Evolution occurs within a population. An individual cannot evolve. A population can. How does the population evolve? From generation to generation to generation through time. The individuals that did good yesterday have babies today. The babies that are born today will have the next generation tomorrow. That's how populations change. And remember, environments change. And as the environments change, the individuals in that environment must change with it. If you can't change with it, if you can't deal with it, if you can't live in that current environment, you have 2 choices: leave or die. Either way, you're not leaving behind kids here for tomorrow. A population is a group of individuals of the same species that can interbreed in the same area. Populations can get geographically isolated. They can be separated from each other by some sort of a natural feature, like a river, like a mountain range. If they are separated from each other, they don't share genetic information anymore. If they can't share genetic information, then those mutations we talked about, those random changes, they are kept separate from each other. And if they're kept separate from each other, then that means that they're not sharing anymore. And if you allow that to happen for many hundreds of generations, then what happens is you get 2 different species that were once the same species. But because this natural feature separated them, they weren't able to interbreed anymore. They stopped being the same species after many hundreds of generations. This often can happen with lakes. Imagine that this area is covered by a lake. Rivers can change course, and when rivers change course, what that could do is that could drain this lake. And now all of the fish that used to live in this lake, this big, huge lake, are now all confined to these individual small little ponds. And how is a fish going to get from this pond to that pond? This is a natural feature that the fish can't cross. And if the fish can't cross it, now the fish that we find in these different lakes are isolated from each other. If that continues, if that lasts for a few thousand years, actually more like a few tens of thousands of years, then they will become different species because those mutations were built up. But what's likely to happen is this is probably like a floodplain, and so every few hundred years, like every 5 or 10 generations, the whole place floods and the fish are able to get back and forth from pond to pond. But this is what can happen. Populations can get separated by some geographic feature which prevents them from interbreeding.